preparing this presentation, I came across this paper that was recently published, and then it talks about food system governance having 3 key perspectives that we need to consider before you even talk about who is investing. And the 3 perspectives are mainly the discipline framing, the goal conflict, as well as the power and influence. So allow me to kind of go into detail on what are these 3 perspectives that are very key. So under the disciplinary framing, the question that we need to be able to put on the table is which disciplines or perspectives have come to frame the description of what we are calling the food system crisis or the solutions. Others would say it started out with ecologists or socio-ecological system, but now we have scholars from political science, sociology, economics, human geography, as well as the consumer science. All these aspects are on the table when we are talking about food system. So the question that we need to have in our minds, or the reflection questions that I want to leave with you today, is whose power and politics is needed to address the structural inequalities in food system development. How and why people choose and prefer the food that they have. If we are talking about the food system, we are talking about taking the food from production to the table and even beyond. But who is getting this food and how are they getting them and why are they getting them? Those perspectives are key because they are going to drive us to understand the direction that we are taking when it comes to investment. And the question remains is, these cannot be generalized because there are different aspects that are driving what we would call a food system approach across the different areas. On the goal conflict, again, another scholar indicated that sustainable food system transformation must deliver positive outcomes across all key dimensions of food system. And that's the complexity that we have on the table. So we are looking at the environment. The question was raised earlier in the previous panel, governance, resilience. But the issue, as Dr. Jamare had indicated, is how do we strike the appropriate balance to achieve all these aspects? I'm sure in all of us here have a different perspective that we are bringing on the table when we are talking about the food system, depending on where we are coming from, depending on our ideologies, depending on our identity. So the key is to acknowledge that there is need for trade-offs, because if we are on a policy space, you cannot do everything at once. So when do we do what and where? So the issue of space and time is what is very key. That is going to define us when we are talking about tracking and measuring investment. Where are we tracking it? What time are we tracking it? When are we doing what we are doing? So again, I leave with you with reflection questions on how do we increase production to feed the growing population as well as conserve the environment. That is a trade-off that we need to be mindful of. How do we achieve net zero carbon emission levels for countries like Malawi that are aspiring to develop through agriculture, trade, mining, and manufacturing, the famous ATM and M strategy that Malawi has put in place? And then, at the same time, who should offset the global emissions and why? So these questions are very key because if we have them and we have managed to answer, then we are going to understand that the investment that is going in the food system space is going to fill the intended purposes, and we are going to be able to measure what has been the impact at the end of the day. The last component being power and politics. So on the power and politics, on one side, we have the market power. And on the other side, we have the policy power. Under the policy power, there are also different aspects that we need to be very careful and understand, which would call the interest politics, conflict of interest, as well as the knowledge politics. I will try to also expand on that. But on the market power, when I was reading at the concept that was shared with me on the conference here, there was a mention of African Free Continental Trade Area, which is a strategy that as a continent we have agreed to move forward on. And indeed, when we look at the AFCTA, it provides opportunity to integrate Africa into an single trade system. However, I recently did work with the Food and Agriculture Organization looking at how do we integrate tea, because Malawi is one of the major growers of tea, into the African Free Continental Trade Area. And one thing that we find is that most of the agreements have remained to be on the paper. But currently, 3 years, 4 years down the line after the agreement, no trade is happening. What are the major issues? What are the major bottlenecks that are coming forward? We have non-trade barriers that remain to be an issue. Despite that people have agreed that they are going to trade, but they still have all these barriers that they are saying you cannot move, you cannot bring. But also we have the infrastructure challenges. For you to be able to say, I have a market in Morocco, the Northern Africa is the demand for tea in the Northern Africa is really growing. But when you look at an estate or a smallholder grower in Malawi who is producing tea, to move that product to where it is demanded, the infrastructure and the cost remains very high. So the non-trade barriers, despite that the agenda has been put in place, remains to be a bottlenecks that is limiting how much we can invest in what we're calling the food system transformation. So at the bottom of it all is the control of material resources, technologies, and job, which goes back to who has the power in the space that we are operating on. On the policy power, let me take you to the three concepts that I had indicated, the interest politics. So the interest politics talks about what specific interest of individuals or groups that are lobbying and advancing the food system saying. So in that space, those that have interest politics are the ones that would drive the agenda, because if they have the resources that they have on the table, then they are going to drive the agenda. Are we able to understand the conflict of interest that is there, depending on those that are investing and those that are tracking? Again, the knowledge politics. Why are we generating the knowledge that we are generating? How are we generating it? Where is it coming from? Who is doing this? So all these dynamics are dynamics that are very key for us to understand that if we are going to track and say that we have achieved, we should have all these dynamics at the back of our mind. So I will say that these perspectives therefore give us reasons why we need to track and measure the food system interventions at different levels. I haven't said generalized, because remember, these interventions are going to be at different levels and at different time across space and over time. Going back to the standard reason why we need to track and monitor, this is something that we all know, but I'll just repeat it. Issues of accountability, we need to remain accountable. For those that are financing, also for those that are expecting it to see a change from the activities that we are doing. Previously, the session, there was a mention of farmers are waiting for us to give them what is expected, meaning that we need to be accountable in the development space for us to change or for us to be able to transform the food system. At the same time, tracking will help us to identify what is working. This whole complexity needs to be able to be unearthed for us to understand what is it that is working and what is not working. Because if we do that, we'll be able to allocate resources properly and effectively. Again, we are talking of effective utilization of resources. Currently, traditional sources of funding are drying out. We can all agree that we can no longer source funds from the traditional aspects. And the demand now is more on collaborated and joint work beyond single interventions as it was. And then the issue of promoting, adapting, and scaling up the interventions. So it's not about the one size fits all. What works in one place would not work in another place. But learning and adapting and adopting would be the key why we need to track and monitor investments in the agri-food system. So what should be measured or what can be tracked? Recall that we are in a complex system, which is a food system complex. And then we cannot manage to stand on one side and say we have able to measure and we have tracked their investment. So we need to be broader enough for us to say what has happened in the food system in terms of the investment, this is what we have achieved. So we are looking at the traditional indicators under the economics. But then we need to go beyond. What are the social, gender inclusion, nutritional issues, as well as the environmental? Issues of soil health remains to be on the table. Issues of emissions, carbon footprints are becoming more important in the investments that we are doing. Issues of water footprint, as we have just talked about here, all that needs to be integrated for us to be able to have a comprehensive system that we are going to say we have managed to track and monitor the investment. Several tools are there. We have the CADAP framework, we have the commitments that have been made under the FCTA, we have the agriculture GDP plus metric, which is going beyond the economic value of the GDP to include other aspects. We have the agriculture employment plus indicators, and then we have the inclusive agriculture transformation benchmarking tool. All these tools are there that are helping us to measure and track. But the issue is, despite that we have so many tools, the idea is not to work in isolation. Let's bring these tools together for us to be able to understand how we can converge the investments in the food system. If we are looking at the different tools, each of the two would have its own aspects, but we have to bring them together for us to be able to understand. And at the center of it all is not just qualitative data or quantitative data, but both qualitative and quantitative data. And data is going to be very key, because data remains to be an important tool. Most of the dashboards that we have information, they do not have data. So we process it and we put it there, which others cannot use for their decisions because it's already processed information. So the idea is that we should all be able to report, to record, and to share. And at the same time, as implementing agencies, as governments, we should be able to be accountable to the process. And then the funding agents should also be able to align with the development goals as developed in the food system framework. I leave you with this quote, or I should say, if you forget everything, remember this quote: what gets measured gets managed. But what gets measured well drives transformation. So we should aim for measuring very well for us to understand the magnitude of the challenge and be able to assess the transformation that is needed. Moving forward, tracking and monitoring required resources. And it is important to say, as Beatrice introduced, it should never be an afterthought. It should be the first thing that comes on the table when we are talking about tracking and measuring. In 2021, government and public agencies were supported to develop the food system framework ahead of the UN Food System Summit. But the question that we have on the table now is, who is getting the funding for implementation? And how are we tracking what was developed and what is being done? So overall, we can only track and measure the intended results if we understand the interest of different players. I leave that statement. Thank you very much. To truly transform food systems, we must treat impact measurement not as a formality, but as a learning process, one that informs smarter policies, drives innovation, and ensures investments that lead to lasting change. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. I think maybe that also qualifies as a masterclass. Yeah, so as we now dive deep into it, I hope you also have been reflecting, because then I'm going to call the panel, and as the panelists are coming in, we'll need at least 4 recommendations that will warrant us to go for lunch. And the recommendations on how better we can track and measure the commitments would have to come from these 4 key strategic stakeholders that are here. The youth must use all the digital tools that are available to them to give us one recommendation. Intergenerational or champions? The other side, let's get from the academicians. The civil society must give us, if there's private sector, they must also share with us at least one recommendation on how we can better track, and then our colleagues also from the academia. So we'll get those, and those will be part of where we can engage as the audience. So now let me invite Ms. Cindy Kasambala, who is the program officer responsible for monitoring and evaluation from the East African community. We will also be joined by Mr. Vitumbiko Shinoko, who is the program manager at the Africa Agriculture Technology Foundation, ATF. Then we'll call for Dr. Majola Mabuza, who is the specialist for special programs with CADESA. I think these are the three that we have. Probably maybe for better view, we can just maybe go towards that so that you are here. Yep. Okay, we're waiting for Dr. Majola. Yeah. So thank you so much and welcome our esteemed panelists to this conversation where we're looking at tracking and measuring agri-food system investments. So I will start with Dr. Majola, because we talked about tools, methodologies, and what is it that we're measuring, I think from all the important insights that we've gotten from Dr. Sarah. And wanted to understand from CADESA's point of view, how have you contributed towards agriculture tracking investment, and what lessons do we learn from the work that you have done in as far as going beyond data to also looking at impact?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, facilitator, for the opportunity and the question. Maybe to start off, one can indicate that CADESA is an institution under a REC, that is SADC Secretariat. So our contribution has been to work with them in terms of tracking from the countries using the EBR, the CADAP framework, capacitating the focal points within the member states, and developing those biennial review reports to see to what extent countries are achieving the set targets. And over and above that, the programs that we have, our policies, our programs, and activities that we are coordinating as CADESA, they are more or less aligned to the regional framework that is anchored within the SADC Secretariat. I'll make an example of one program that we are implementing, the Food Systems Resilience Program, funded by the World Bank, implemented by a few countries at the moment, Madagascar, Malawi, Tanzania, and Comoros. We're hoping Mozambique will come on board, but there are still discussions there and there. So the point I'm driving at is this is a program on food systems resilience. And from the presentation that we've just had, food systems, if you're talking of food systems, you are looking at diverse entry points towards enhancing food security, food and nutrition security, as well as resilience. So within that program, there are a lot of components, about 5 of them. But what is important to share with the audience here is that each and every country, they know where their pain points are. So within those components, looking at their national agricultural investment programs, they know where the priorities are, what they want to invest in. And then at the end of the day, whatever program that is being implemented, it has to support that national initiative and also be within the confines of the CADA process. So what we see as an encouragement to us is, even though there's some fragmentation within individual countries in terms of the data sources, for those that have, there is that commitment, as we see from the first BR report, that there's some improvement that we're seeing from the countries in terms of the quality of the data and also the rate at which the data is generated from the countries. Even though we have not reached a state where we can say now we really have the kind of data that we have. So I think that's what CADESA is doing, and it is within our responsibility, within FSRP, to support these countries, as I have explained, and also to see to it that whatever other programs that are coming through, we don't want to see any competition I'll make an example with another program that has come also through the same donor. They have their own indicators over and above what we have under the CADA process. But through discussions and consultations, we have reached an agreement that whatever indicators that they are coming up with, they should not be in conflict with those of the CADA, but they should enhance what the broader continental initiative is all about. And again, we should make sure that those who have been capacitated through the CADA process, like the focal point persons, they need to be part of that process. It's a program on resilience enhancing as well, particularly on climate smart agriculture. Maybe I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, taking that leadership to ensure that the indicators that are being tracking are common and standardized, but also to allow for regional comparison, especially that this is a regional and Africa-wide commitment. So let me move, talking about the regional commitments, let me move to Miss Cindy Kasambala from the East African community. One of the areas that is being tracked and the commitment, it's around inter-Africa trade. And I think even Dr. Sarah here, I just mentioned about the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement. And last year, there was jubilation, ululation, and celebration when Kenya, I think, had sent the first containers to Ghana for tea under this particular guided trade initiative. So from the regional perspective, let's say maybe here, how then do we move progressively in terms of this implementation and making sure that since 2021, when we began to implement the AfCFTA, coming it into action, into implementation, we can really achieve those targets, because that is, as it stands now, with the fourth biennial report, we are still trading behind. So let's hear from you, Ms. Cindy, on how we can harness and how the region can support achieving these commitments.
mobilize ourselves and to produce those needed products in the market. As I mentioned, number of potential markets, we'll be able to cover the gap of this potential for the African Free Continental Trade Area. But also there are a number of issues which we have learned. If they'll be taken care, then we'll be able to optimize this market. For example, there's an imbalanced trade, as Dr. Sarah said. So far, the market is not giving each other equal opportunities. Like one partner set might want to trade a certain commodity, but the other partners, the other country in the region will restrict this country because of their own interest. You want to trade this, but then they don't want what you want to trade. So there's an equal trade or equal imbalance, and we need a lot of negotiating powers and mechanism that will make an equal distribution of this market. But also, as you can see, there are countries in the EAC, they have potential. But why are they not doing trade as we're speaking? Dr. Sarah said so far, only a few partner states have managed to trade. But why? There's a problem. There's a problem. First of all, we need to reduce the number of non-tariff trade barriers equally in the continent. Because if these non-tariff barriers are worked on, then the trade will be freely and equal in the African continent. So far, there are a number of barriers, including some of the partner states. They are not willing to trade because of these inequalities. Kenya has shown example in the region. But what about other partner states? They are waiting for the right time, maybe, where they can see the benefit after we remove these non-tariff barriers. Maybe for a moment, that's what I can say.
Thank you so much. We can only move on the trade outcomes if non-tariff barriers are resolved. Let's now move to Mr. Vitumbiko. From the angle of investment, you have, from your experiences as well as lessons in investing in technology, dissemination, and scaling up adoption, what has been your lessons and experiences, especially have those investments really translated into a noticeable impact at farmer level?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and also thank you very much, Fanapan, for inviting ATF to this forum. We are really humbled that we can be present and participate in this discussion, starting from last year and even to this year. And we also want to pledge that going forward we'll continue to be in this space. ATF, we promote the development of technologies and transfer them to farmers in 24 countries. So we're a big player in that sense. And we do all manner of technologies, but allow me for purposes of this meeting to really focus on one of the most contentious but extremely transformative technologies, which is the biotechnology, particularly within that, the genetically modified technologies that are transforming lives in the different countries. The model that we've used to bring up investment is the public-private partnerships. So we've really been working with governments, private sector, investors and all that to really cloud in a lot of resources so that we can do research, we can transfer these technologies and really impact farmers on the ground. What we've seen is that indeed you perhaps also have experienced the same, that the normal charity-based investment is actually going down. It is not the quantum of the monies that are available, it's actually where it is now. I think it has just changed location. So we've seen that the private sector is still a lot of money, and therefore it's really about bringing in different actors together. And through these public-private partnerships, we've been able to do quite a lot. So these, what we've learned really is that they're looking for scale. We're also looking at what a unit investment, what kind of return does a unit level of investment is going to bring. And because we've been able to translate that, to bring that up in our concept notes, but also in the implementation, we've seen different actors really coming up to support us. Madam Moderator, talking about impact on the ground, I wish to bring out one of the technologies that we have promoted in Kenya, Mozambique, and also Nigeria, very soon to be commercialized as well in Ethiopia. This is telomeres. This is drought-resistant maize. And we've seen, for example, at farmer level, where the viewed advantage are ranging between 20 to 30%, and that's very substantial. Allow me also to talk about the PBR cowpea, which is an insect-resistant technology, genetically modified as well. And this technology has been able to reduce the use of pesticides use by 80%. And this has been commercialized in Nigeria, and it's been used by farmers now for the 4th year running. So all the issues that you hear about genetically modified technologies, that they are bad and all that, we have not experienced that, but all the advantages, we have seen all the advantages. In other cases, we've also seen income gains per hectare, which have actually ranged between $200 to $300 per hectare around different technology that we are promoting in the different countries of Africa. In Southern Africa, where we are, as I said, we are in Malawi, where the cotton has actually demonstrated a lot of impact. This is genetically modified cotton, and also Mozambique, which has just commercialized or partially commercialized the telomeres. So we've really seen a lot of impact. But allow me to say that maybe when you have to categorize at different levels, this impact has largely just been at micro level. Micro level because of adoption. I think we really believe that if more people adopt these technologies, then we can also start to speak about the impact at macro level. The challenges that these technologies do encounter at the end of the day are not different from the challenges that Dr. Sarah talked about in terms of the food systems ecosystem. Whether this is biotech, whether this is conventional, we still need aggressive policy reforms because they're going to use more or less the same systems. They're still going to use the same infrastructure, be it roads, be it whatever. So I think it's very important to acknowledge that regardless of the type of innovation or technology, we still have the same challenges, including markets. Maybe because we're also talking about tracking, I just want to go there and then I'll stop there. I think we are so happy, those of us that are working in the biotech space, that the Kampala Declaration has been extremely categorical in terms of how we want to tackle biotechnology. And we have a statement in there that we're riding on to ensure that we go into indicator development so that we know exactly what we're going to track. But I think I also want to call on the issue of how do we want at country level to ensure equity and parity on all these things that have been suggested in the Kampala Declaration. I think this is where we've also seen some gaps because we've tended to use these declarations, for example, just to channel one sort of way of doing things. I think it's very important to ensure that all technologies, all approaches are admitted within the process of the Kampala Declaration. It is up to the context to ensure which ones we can be deployed, but we should ensure that we are fully democratizing the agriculture space, and we do believe that the Kampala Declaration provides us with that, so that Africa also can have the technologies that other continents do have. We believe that we can actually change the food systems towards sustainability, but also food security and nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vitumbiko, for that and the call for aggressive, disruptive reforms, both at policy level, in our attitudes and practices, as well as in processes. So I will now invite, since we are talking about inclusive engagements, there is a champion from the non-state actors' perspective who is going to then also give us her reflection. She is none other than Chikondi Chavutankawa, who is chairing the CADIP non-state actor group on the continent. As she is coming to join us, remember the recommendations so that then she can also reflect them together. So who's ready? With the youth, with renewed focus and energies, as that the youth are going to run with this vision. Are you ready? Thank you. Please, the mic. The recommendations from the youth. Please take your seat.
It's okay. Yeah. Just carry on.
Okay, thank you. This is directed to, I forget her name, the lady who is wearing purple. Yes. In your presentation, you were speaking to the 100 billion investment that we're talking about and how it is we're going to track that in achieving or getting to acquire that amount. In your research or in what it is you have been looking at, what ways have you established or what ways have you thought through? Because now we have to change the way it is we think of getting investments with what it is has been happening globally. So are there not recommendations, are there ways in which you have engaged with stakeholders to determine how it is we will arrive at that figure as Africans? Or are we going to look for other cooperating partners?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a question, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm also adding my voice to the youth, but mine is a recommendation and not a question. I've noticed that most of the time in the conversation of M&E, we focus on numbers. I'm not an expert, so I'm not so sure whether that's all it's supposed to be. But I would suggest also that we include an approach of experience capitalization, where we'd also be able to capture the qualitative aspects of monitoring. So we'd get to know why some successes were achieved or why not, and maybe what made it happen, stuff like that. And aside that, when you mentioned that youth should use all their digital tools, it gave me an idea. And that is, I believe it would be great for us to kind of explore integrating digital tools in reporting. So we'll be able to have real-time reporting. I believe that would help us to make corrections along the way while we go. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more hands. Yes, Prof.
Thank you. So, from academia, I was fascinated with Dr. Sarah Tione's slides towards the end, where she talks about measuring well, resulting in transformation. And also in one of the slides, you showed a few tools that are available for tracking. And the question that I have is, do these tools measure the same thing? Or if we apply them, we are going to come to different results altogether. And so as an academic, as a researcher, I'm looking for a tool that can measure honestly, adequately, and accurately. The choice among users should simply be which one is easier to use. So if I come to South Africa, I'm able to use my card on any ATM. Can we have a tool that can be used in any country, standardized? The results the same, because then politicians can contest the results and choose maybe a tool that gives a result that is favorable and commits less money and shows that they made a higher contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more, last one. Going once? Okay. There's two, okay. Yes, both of you. Thank you.
This is a build-up to the question that has just been posed here. Following measurement and issues of accountability, when the data is known that the commitment was 8%, 5%, we don't hear a recommendation in terms of advocacy for accountability for failure to meet commitments that are already set in the continental frameworks. What is the recommendation to our public sector or government in terms of them being responsive and accounting for the resources that they've been allocated for project development or for development? Thank you.
Thank you for that accountability angle. Last one.
Thank you so much. I'm Teresa Gondwe, working with International Livestock Research Institute. My question goes to Dr. Sarah, and also it's building on the question from our youth. I don't know how best can we incorporate qualitative results when we are doing this, when we're implementing the tools that are in our strategies or policies. This is because I was once involved in reporting on achievements under CADEP in Malawi when I was working with UN Women. But then on gender, the focus was on number of men and women, but we miss other indicators like on decision-making processes, but also like women empowerment. How are women being empowered? We are seeing a lot of achievements like in Malawi that women now are in women-led cooperatives, which are translating into them being empowered economically. But then these myths, when we are collecting information on reporting, like on CADIP achievements, how would we go best on this? Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. So before I call on Ms. Chikondi, please, if we are able to do under 1 minute, to really just interrogate the issues of how do we strengthen accountability, how do we balance between qualitative and quantitative data, and how do we embed storytelling so that it is beyond the numbers. So we'll start with you, Dr. Majola. Then Ms. Cindy, get ready. Then Mr. Chinoko, then we'll finish with Dr. Sarah.
Okay, let me start with the qualitative. I think it's a fair comment. Sometimes figures cannot tell the whole story. You really need that balance. And as we are moving to the Kampala phase of the CADA process, I think the opportunity is there to make some of these inputs so that they are taken on board in terms of how we want to see our tracking being done and our reporting. And one can also indicate that even for the qualitative, I think just to ride on some of the questions that have been made, even on the quantitative, the point that has been made that the different tools that are there, if they are different but measuring the same thing, but at the end you find different results, it raises the question mark again. So I think it's something that we still need to work on so that we give the balanced recommendations at the end. And then on the accountability, maybe I can leave that for others. It's a concern because these are commitments that are coming from the countries to say we are committing to the CADA process. There are signatures there from those in the higher echelons. But when the reports come, you now want to find out from the last report, what have you implemented going into the next BR? You will find that there are some gaps again. Same recommendations that were there previously, they are still not there. So I think it's a matter of us again, as we were saying from this morning, that some of these decisions need to come from us. What do we do with those who do not account for whatever they've been assigned to do, or those recommendations? I saw somewhere where they were saying that if you are doing now your next National Agricultural Investment Program, whatever recommendations that were there in the previous report, we need to see them being flagged in the new one. How far have you gone before you start building? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was about?
Just your reflection on how can we enhance accountability for the commitments at a regional level.
Okay. First of all, it was about the indicators, qualitative indicators. Yeah, I agree. There are so many means that we can collect the progress of the CADAP process. And now we are going to Kampala Declaration. We can use different means of reporting. We can use photos. We can use success stories. There are many ways that we can document impact. By focusing on numbers, we are leaving out other form of reporting success. So I agree with our youth there that we have been ignoring this, and it's high time that when we are going to the Kampala Declaration regime or stage, we need to incorporate both qualitative and qualitative indicators. It can help us also to show some of the impact that before we are not able to tell. So we can collect all the evidences and the facts that were left out in the other processes, from first report to the fourth report. But also in accountability, I think it's high time that before we come to the new phase, maybe we can track where we came from and where we are. And if there's a failure, or if there's a lesson for us to learn and correct, and make sure that we move in a correct way, let us take that chance. Because we can, for all the reports, from first to fourth, now to fifth one, we have been doing the same thing. And the farmers are still there. They are still poor. They are not benefiting. So we need to do something to change the narrative. I agree. Thank you.
Let's do something. Mr. Chinoko, how do we do something?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm also advocating for inclusion of qualitative assessments, but I also want to think that these two reports are quite complementary. So I think it's very important that we are not just focusing on telling fables and stories, but I think let's see how we can also back them with concrete figures. It's extremely important. I think the addition that I'd also want to make is that I think these stories, it would be important if they really bring out farmer experiences. So it's not just me saying that this is what is happening, but if I'm pulling up figures here, can those figures, for example, also be echoed by farmers who are actually experiencing these technologies, like in our case? If it makes sense to the farmer, definitely that's the end that we are all achieving towards. In terms of accountability, I think of Kampala Declaration, I'm thinking that it's very important to also ground our efforts on the national processes, because there is a national process that tries to implement the Kampala Declaration. I think most of us were not in that process, so when we were coming up, for example, with the national compacts that are going to implement these declarations, we're not there. So this is where, for example, you are really nationalizing the Kampala Declaration and other declarations that are there. So it's very important that we are extremely active at national level, and this is what we'll be doing, for example, to advance biotechnology. We will be in the countries, so that if we're talking about indicators on biotechnology, we want to ensure that each of the governments that we're working with, they have a compact specifically addressing how they want to implement biotechnology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start with the first question on the investment. I think the idea is to no longer work in isolation. If in the food system space, we are able to bring in the different perspectives. And the funding agencies are also looking at them at disciplinary approach in the way we are looking for resources. So if we are to tap into the available resources that are there and have the investment, the 10,000 investment which was spoken this morning, it is important that we collaborate and work together. But also, as we set our priorities from the presentation, the perspectives that are driving that investment should be very clear. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to be measuring different things compared to the things that have been invested. On the issue of different tools, indeed, the tools are different. And they are developed by different people, different organizations with different motives. But the idea is, how do we harmonize this? So from the regional bodies that we have, the continental bodies that we have, it is high time that we are able to understand what are the indicators that as a continent we are looking at. But beyond having the regional or continental indicators, the issue that has been talked about, domesticating these indicators, region or having the national frameworks that are saying what the countries are going to do. Because oftentimes we bring the indicators at national level, and then when they're being reported on, we find that the priorities of the countries are also different. And at the end of the day, the indicators continue to be reported on over and over without any progress. So if agencies, governments have to be accountable, we should be able to also understand the perspectives on the priorities that they are putting on board, and then the investment decisions that they are making. I'll give an example of my country, Malawi. 10% investment in the agriculture sector has been achieved over time. But the question that has been on the table is, where is that 10% going? You find that 10% is going into one direction, which is procuring fertilizer for subsidy. And then at the end of the day, we are not achieving the 60%. So it's not just a metric of 10% is going to translate into 66%. It's because where is the 10% going? What mechanisms should we put in place at that country level for us to say, when we do 10%, we are going to achieve the 6%? Advocacy and accountability. I think it is important to also remember that the narrative of advocacy and accountability is not only for government. Agencies that are funding and non-governmental organizations that are sitting on the table, those that are supporting governments, all of us, we need to be accountable. We need to be advocates for us to be able to account. You often see that a shift in resource from public institutions to non-governmental sector. But then nobody goes into the non-governmental sector and bring up the issue of accountability in the non-governmental sector. So that is also very key. As I indicated in the presentation, the question of who is being funded to implement activities under food system, are they accountable, and how are we tracking? Because we find that public agencies might be funded, then we go to them for us to report the indicators on food system when resources have not been channeled to the implementers who we are asking for to give us the indicators. So accountability and advocacy, it's an issue of everyone. It goes beyond government and public agencies. It's for all of us. And how best can we do this? Qualitative and quantitative data, as I indicated. Quantitative data, I'm an economist. It's the comfort place, because you can talk 1, 2, 3, and it's standard. But when it comes to qualitative data, you need to really go a step beyond, and for you to be able to package. So those of us that are coming from traditional quantitative aspect, we need to get out of our comfort zone and be able to say, how best can we also incorporate qualitative data in the indicators that we are putting on board? You find that most of the indicators are developed by quantitative people. But if we bring in that perspective and incorporate qualitative aspects, then the agriculture GDP plus is also one of the things that is incorporating issues of qualitative data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, a reflection from Ms. Chikondi.
Thank you so much. But before I do my reflections, can we just give a big hand to our moderator and the panel? Thank you very much. I felt like we should go on talking, but I know that I am standing in between you and lunch, so I will try to be as brief. As I was introduced, Chikondi, and I am the CADEP Non-State Actors Chairperson. The issue of fragmentation that has been mentioned from morning, we provide a solution. So our solution is all those who are non-state, let us come together and work together with government in advancing the CADIP goals and agenda. The CADIP framework is our Pan-African agenda developed by ourselves And our role as non-state actors is to improve that process to deliver the impact that this high-level panel and the comments in the room have been suggesting today. So thank you so much. A few of the policy reflections that I would like to share and that we can take from this. It's very difficult. It was quite packed. But let me just share 10. So the first one is we have talked about this CADEP moving from Maputo to Malabo, and now we are going into the Kampala era. We have promised. Now let's prove it. So for 2 decades, Africa has made these bold commitments, but too often, tracking impact comes last. It's time to measure what matters. And actually, when we are measuring, there has to be that flexibility to change what is not working, but also adapt what is relevant in that context for the real change in people's lives to be seen and the dream of CADEP to actually be realized. Number 2, agri-food systems are Africa's future. It's not just agriculture anymore. Agri-food systems touch every part of life: food, trade, nutrition, environment, and jobs. If we get this right, we just don't feed people. We are transforming economies and futures. Number 3, tracking is power. And this team right here has really emphasized it. So let's use it wisely. What we choose to track reveals who we value, what we prioritize, and where we are going. If we only measure yields, we miss the bigger picture. Let's track what truly drives resilience, equity, and prosperity. Governance is a game changer, and Dr. Sarah Tione did mention that quite clearly. Good food systems need more than good seeds. They need good policies, smart institutions, and bold leadership. From local bylaws to Africa trade deals, governance shapes the plate, and we must ask who holds the power and for whose benefit. Embrace complexity, navigate trade-offs. That was mentioned clearly. There are no silver bullets. Every decision in agri-food systems involves trade-offs. More food versus climate protection, higher output versus equity. Let's stop pretending it's linear and start managing this complexity with wisdom and courage. Technology with impact, not just hype. From drought-resistant maize to biotech cowpeas, innovations are only as good as the policies and markets that support them. The Kampala Declaration is pointing the way. Now we must translate this innovation into impact. We need to converge tools, but also ensure that these many metrics that are there, from national to continental level, are harmonized. And let's bring this together so that they are people-centered, and this fragmented tracking should actually come to an end. Data is a mirror. That's been emphasized. Let's not look away. Data should do more than sit in reports. It must spark dialogue. It must drive reform and shape the future. When done well, tracking becomes a tool for truth, for transparency, and for transformation. And number 9, let the farmers feel the change. From commitment, it really needs to change the lives of our African farmers. The ultimate question is, did we spend 10%? Should change. It should be, did farmers feel that 10%? If our investments don't touch lives, increase incomes, reduce hunger, or empower young people and women, then we must ask, what are we measuring for? And the final one that I'm taking away from this team is that we need to track to learn and learn to lead. Impact tracking is not just a checkbox, it's a leadership tool. When we track honestly, we learn, we adapt, and we grow. Let's make measurement a pathway to leadership, not just accountability. And a final thought that I would like to finish and give back the mic. We're not just measuring yields, we're measuring hope, we're measuring futures, and also something that sticks is what gets measured well, gets transformation ball rolling. as we're talking about food system transformation, let us be very clear of what we are tracking and track it boldly, govern wisely, but also lead with purpose. Because Africa's food systems are too important to leave to chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, that was tracking and measuring agri-food system investments. Thank you so much for this. Let's give another round of applause for these ones. Thank you. Oh, there's a moment of fame.